Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all mostly awake, because I'm usually not up at this hour, so this is like a rare thing for me. I'm going to talk about splitter critters. Let's get into it. Some of you are probably asking, like, what the heck is splitter critters? So the best way to explain that is just with a quick video. So let's take a real quick look here. So as you can see, it's a puzzle game about splitting the world to help those little critters get back to their spaceship. And also a fun fact, the sounds that those little blue critters make were actually made by the previous presenter. So we released it on iOS and Android earlier this year. We're actually working on bringing it to some more exciting platforms very soon. It won an Apple Design Award a few months ago, so I assume we did something right, I guess. And the whole thing started in a game jam. So the very first version we had about 72 hours to make. Like the theme was shapeshift, and we had to come up with a game from scratch in 72 hours. From there it took about 9 months to finish. But let's rewind those 9 months. Let's take a look at that very first version. So, it's, compared to that video, it's pretty rough visually, but functionally it's pretty much the same. You're still doing the same things, like splitting the world, sliding it into place, and getting critters back to their spaceship. We got really good response from the game jam, we had good feedback, and we decided that we weren't going to mess around with the core concept very much. So we didn't really change the gameplay at all. But we still had to finish this game. And now we're kind of in uncharted territory. We have this game mechanic that no one's really played before. We don't really know how to use it very much. We just have no idea what we're doing. There were still like hundreds of important design decisions we needed to make. So we had to rely a lot on playtesting, just getting as many people to play the game as possible just to see what are the problems. So let's talk about the very biggest problem with the game, the split line. It had the most iterations out of any system in the game, and we just couldn't get it feeling right for a long time. So let's look at the very first version. So this is the game jam split line. And it actually runs in the web browser. So it uses the mouse. You can drag a line anywhere on the screen and create a split. And then there's that little handle attached to it that you can grab and slide the world around. And it works fine. For a game jam, it was totally fine. But then as soon as we wanted to move it to mobile, we had a problem. There is no mouse on mobile, so we had to do something. So then we just threw a handle on the other side. So now everything is just using your finger. You can swipe anywhere on the screen to create a split, and then grab one of those handles and sort of move it around. And it was good enough. It worked. We could have just stopped here, but I don't know. It wasn't good enough for us. We knew it could be better. And then we actually got people to play the game, and then we realized how horrible this version actually is. You really need players to play your game, because people's first interaction with this was what is that? What are those things? I don't know what they do, I don't really want to touch them, I'm scared to break the game, which is not really a good thing, you don't really want that. They didn't know they could slide the world. So we thought, okay, well, we can fix this, let's change this. So we changed them into circles, because now it kind of looks a little bit more like buttons. You know, you might want to grab them a little bit more. We added those little tracks to make it feel like a slider, so you should know what you're doing with them a little bit more. But it's still not really intuitive at this point. And what's even worse is that now people are doing like a really weird gesture with it, like they're putting one finger on each circle and trying to like spread the world apart. It's like a really perverse thing to watch, but... so we thought, oh man, we have to fix this. So we got rid of one of the circles. Now there's just one thing on screen that you could possibly grab. How could anybody get this wrong? Of course they did. But let's talk about the positives. So now it's a bit more efficient. Because we're sliding both sides at the same time now, you only have to drag half as far, which on a mobile phone screen is really good. So it's still kind of a net positive, but it's still not really intuitive. We didn't really solve that problem with the circles. Players still don't know what they are, and what's even worse is that white line that represents the split is becoming even more of a problem. Because sometimes the critter will pass underneath it, sometimes it'll hit the white line and turn around, and players were starting to form all kinds of like incorrect ideas about what the white line was. And like the circle and the line, like they don't really have any affordances or like hints as to what they are or how they should be used. So we had to go back to the drawing board. Now, throwing stuff away is super hard, but sometimes it's completely necessary. Like in this case, we just went back to the original art inspiration for the game, which was paper. So we were tearing up some sheets of paper, just going wild, tearing sheets up and like taking a look at what it would look like. And we really liked what we saw, so we mocked it up in Photoshop and came up with some variations and thought, okay, this looks great. And players would actually understand what this is. Like it has a physical analog. Like they can wrap their head around this a lot better than like a white line. But now, like if we just slapped that like circle handle on there or like attach a handle to it for sliding the world, like it's not gonna feel good. It's gonna feel really intrusive and out of place. So we had to come up with a solution. So we just made the whole screen be the handle. So now you can grab the world anywhere you want and slide it, and it's super intuitive and it looks great. And this is kind of players' first instincts anyways. It's like, it's because it feels kind of physical, they just want to grab it and slide it. So everything's working great. Except now we've introduced this new problem. So because we're using the whole screen to slide the world, we can't use it to create new splits either, right? Like, because you need to swipe the screen to create split, but that's just going to drag the world now. Like, we could have simplified the game and just said, okay, we only need one split, that's fine. But that would have been oversimplifying. The puzzles wouldn't have been complex enough, and it would have made the game a lot worse. I guess we could have added a confirmation button, like when you're happy with your split, you could just like press a button and it would lock into place, and then you could do a new split. But we don't really want to add new buttons. We don't want to add any new UI that we don't have to. We knew there must be a more elegant solution. So we observed our players, and we just noticed what they did. They always did the same thing. They would make a split, they would slide it into place, and then they would just let go, and then make a new split, and slide that into place. And they would just repeat this pattern over and over again. Like they would almost never go back and make a correction and re-slide it. So we just took advantage of that, and we automatically lock it when they release it. So now the screen is just totally freed up to make new splits. And players don't even really notice what's going on because it's kind of working the way they expect it to. Like the player wants to make a new split. So the fact that we locked it for them kind of helps them out, and yeah, it's just a lot less frustrating. But speaking of frustration, we did introduce new frustration because you can't make corrections. If you did make a mistake, you'd actually have to undo the split and re-split the world and re-slide it into place, which is kind of a problem because players are not that accurate. So then we introduced a thing we call auto-align. So when they release a split, we just detect any nearby walkable terrain platforms, and then we just snap them together. So we kind of have to guess, like, what did the player actually want to do, and then we try and do it for them. Which most of the time is pretty good, because you'll never actually know what the player's trying to do, because sometimes they have really weird ideas. Yeah, like at this point, it was good enough. this is actually the version that we shipped with the game. But it's not perfect. We're actually not happy with it. Auto lock still is not great. It doesn't really communicate what it's doing very well. Like, players will still occasionally try and slide a lock split, and then they'll make a new split. I don't know, there's still problems. But we had to draw the line somewhere. We can't work on this game forever. So, oh yeah. So it was time to move on. So let's talk about other stuff. Let's talk about some gameplay challenges. So, very important thing, let's talk about levels. Now, everybody plays levels differently. Well, everybody plays games in general differently. We didn't really know how people were going to play our game, so we had to do tons of play testing to figure that out. Like, we took it to every conference and exhibition we could. Full Indie Summit last year, the demo night, fantastic idea. And it revealed a lot of solutions that we never even thought of. And we really wanted to encourage that, like, creativity and like that feeling of exploration. So first off, let's look at a real simple solution to this level. One split, critters go across, they're in the ship, great. It's like the best solution. Some might even say it's, you know, like the absolute best, it's the optimal way to beat that level. But let's take a look at another solution. It's a little bit different, yeah. But I mean, it's still like solving the same problem, right? Just like with a lot more creativity. But like, we had to kind of decide, like, well, how can we encourage both types of behavior? So at this point, like, after beating a level, a lot of players just expect to be graded on their solution. Like, they want to know, did I do it the right way? How many stars was my solution worth? Like, I want to know. I want like points or stars or something. Like, gimme, gimme, gimme. Well, I don't know, like, we just wanted people to play the way they wanted to play. Like, we didn't want to risk sending the wrong message. So we just said, like, nope, we're not going to tell you anything. When you beat a level, you're going to go on to the next level. Which is like this weird novel idea on mobile. Because, like, just because every other game does something, it's not really a good reason to do it. So yeah, and then we were having this other problem with levels. A big problem. Because, well, they were getting too big. And like, our splitting mechanic is really spatial. So the more space we have in a level, it's like the more space to play around with, and the more challenging it is. It's a lot less obvious where you need to cut and slide to solve the puzzle. But our viewable area is actually really small, especially on a mobile phone where your screen is tiny, and we don't want the critters to be tiny, so we kind of have to zoom in quite a bit on where the critters are, where the action is. Now, for most of the project, we just had these 2-finger gestures to kind of control the camera. So you could pinch to zoom in and out, and you could do like a 2-finger pan to move the camera. And we thought that players needed this to play the game effectively. Like on these big levels, you're gonna need to move the camera. So we put in little tutorials for it and showed them, like, hey, you can pan, you can drag 2 fingers. But then we actually got people to play the game, and for the most part it was fine. But you still have like 10% of players, and I'm talking about normal players, like normal adults that barely even know what a video game is. Those guys had a really hard time wrapping their head around this, because it's not a gesture you would normally do. It felt really weird. So we thought there must be a better solution. So we threw it away, sort of. We actually kept the gestures in the game for people that know that they should be there. But for everybody else, we just made the camera automatic. We already know where everything is. Like, we know where the critters are, and so we just automatically frame everything. Like, the player should never feel like they need to move the camera. But of course, this also meant that we had to redesign every single level. Like, it was a lot of work because we need to make sure the critters go to where players want to make splits. We had to do a lot of play testing and just make sure, like, did you feel like you needed to move the camera? You know, no, okay, good. Because then players could focus on solving puzzles instead of moving the camera, because that's not really what the game is about. Now let's talk a little bit about player expectations. Because, like, I know what you're all expecting it to do. I know. But you have to understand, the way that we play our game, like we don't do this. We would just cut the platforms and bring them together. We don't leave like huge gaps between there because like we knew the critters don't jump. But then players kept doing this over and over again and just expecting it to work. And like, yeah, like this is bullshit, you should totally jump. So we couldn't really think of a reason why not. It's like, I don't know, they got legs, they can do it. So, I don't know, just made them hop over gaps. Like if you're doing playtesting and your player's ever confused or frustrated about something, just kind of ask them like, what did you expect to happen? You know, maybe the game could do it and it might be better if it did. So let's talk a little bit about laser beams. Laser beams are pretty sweet. So you notice the laser beam is a little bit broken here. Just like when you go to slide the world pulls apart a little bit. It's a really subtle piece of feedback just to show that you're, actually sliding the world. Like, yes, you picked it up. But this kind of broke the lasers a little bit. Like, like when you let go, the end point of the laser changes. It's pointing one place and then it's pointing a different place. And this is really frustrating because if you line up a solution, you're not really going to get what you see. So we had to do something about this. So let's take a closer look at the problem. Let's really enlarge what's going on there. So the split is just huge now. So we can see that laser beam is just blasting right through that like black sort of undefined area between the two sides. Now we didn't really know what that area was. It's just sort of this undefined thing. So we decided we needed to come up with a whole bunch of rules for how mechanics interact with the splits. Like what happens when something crosses a split? What happens if the thing gets split? Every single thing in the game needed these rules. In the case of the laser beams, it turns out the best thing to do is just sort of like bend it through the split. And then you kind of have this like nice, consistent world. The player sees, like the solution they pick is the one they're gonna get. It's less frustrating. The player's got confidence with their solution. And like the player doesn't even really know what's going on here. It's just like a small detail we had to put in just to sort of, tie up some loose ends to make everything feel the way it should. So, it's like an unwritten rule. Like players will always try and find a way to kill the inhabitants of your game world. Like it's gonna happen. Like, a game like The Sims turns into a murder simulator if you just accidentally sell the pool ladder while they're taking a swim. And our game was no exception. It's like with the right combination of splits, you could easily just squish a critter to death, accidentally. And like, we kind of want to avoid killing critters as much as possible. I mean, you'd have to restart the level, so that kind of sucks. So we added these squish visuals to just show when this starts to happen. Because like, if you're accidentally doing it, you can just stop squishing them and save their life. And if it's intentional, oh yeah, just keep going until it pops. So let's talk about splitting the world. We've only got time to talk about one really important technical challenge, but it's a big one. Splitting the world, kind of a big deal in this game. So let's ask this cat. So, the first thing this cat is going to tell you is that he is made up of triangles. Because, when you want to render stuff in your game, you usually would use triangles. And then he would ask you, hey, have you ever played Fruit Ninja? And if you have, you know that you can easily just take something and split it into two halves. And you do that just by kind of splitting the triangles. Like, you could just, take each triangle, intersect by that line, and then now you have, a left and a right cat. And, this is a pretty cool concept, and it works really well for, pieces of fruit and cats and triangles. But, how could you apply this to an entire game world? Well, lucky for us, our whole game world is kind of made of triangles. So all we really have to do is just apply that same concept to absolutely everything. So now we have our two halves, left world and right world, and we can just kind of cover it up with that sort of torn paper effect, and then now we have this split paper world. And this technique works really well for objects that don't move. But we had a lot of objects that did move. So we had to do something. So let's look at the cat again. So it's like the same cat, but he's moving around now. And he's moving around in a thing that we call unsplit space. But as soon as he gets split, Then he actually has to move through the split and then come out the other side. And so, like, the way we had to do this was taking the cat from unsplit space and then applying the splits to it every frame to get the cat in split space. And then, like, for every split, we have to keep applying it as well. So, like, there's another split, and then now it's a little bit crazier. So now, like, every frame, you still have that original cat moving left and right in unsplit space. And we're just applying splits to it. And you only really get to see the output of the splits. You never get to see the original cat. Don't worry, he's safe. He's totally fine. And it's a little bit crazy, I guess. But it works. I mean, it's just like the same principle, just applied like a lot, everywhere. It's very elegant. And that's kind of all the time we have. So thank you very much.